While we're waiting, why don't we just start and go around and we'll do the introductions. I'm John Steeple, representing the city of West Dallas. I'll be chairing the meeting today. I'm not sure how to go around, but Dan, you want to go next?
Dan McCarthy, community volunteer.
Anybody jump in? Mildred, you want to?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I don't know what, or Mildred Kobe from Employ Milwaukee.
Hey, Lorenz, Milwaukee County Behavioral Health Division.
Andy Elliott, Community Advocates.
Kristen Haglund, Marquette University.
Marcelia Nicholson, Milwaukee County Board of Supervisors. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Nancy Estevez, Institute for Community Alliances.
Tim Bach, Pathfinders.
Molly Gina with Legal Action of Wisconsin.
Wat Lee from UWM. Good morning, everyone.
Shannon Reed, United Way.
Good morning, Jackie Martinez, Housing Authority.
Go ahead, Stephen.
Stephen Mahan, City of Milwaukee Grants Administration.
Rafi,
have we got everybody?
Milwaukee, City of Milwaukee. You have Emily.
City of Milwaukee.
Cha, the City of Milwaukee.
I see we got 20 people, so shall we proceed with the minutes of the June and August board meetings? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tim. Any corrections or additions or comments? If not, all in favor, did someone have a question? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign, motion passes. Okay, we got an interesting meeting today, to say the least. Shelley, are you going to be taking this, the strategic planning?
Yes, I'll be talking about that, and I just need to be able to screen share. Unless Claire pulls up the slides.
1 second. Hey, Raphael, can you check on your end to see if you can enable Shelley to screen share? Because I'm not the host.
Oh, the host has to be able to set that up. Is that Raphael? Raphael, did you organize the meeting?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Try it now, Shelley. Yes, I think I should be able. You should be able to do it.
Got it.
Got it?
Yep.
Excellent.
Hopefully everybody can see the slides.
Shelley, could you launch the
Yeah,
PowerPoint?
I'm
It might be
trying
getting
to
big. It might get bigger
Find the
than.
way to do that on here. Hang on. There we go. Sorry about that. Good morning. My name is Shelley Schnupp. I am with Spectrum Nonprofit Services, and I've been part of a team working with the continuum of care on strategic planning. And I'm very happy to be here today and see all of you. Just a quick reminder about what this process is about. Like many planning processes, we're looking at a number of things and focusing on making sure we know what the greatest needs of homeless people in Milwaukee are. What does success look like for the COC, and making sure we know how to measure that success. We want to clarify how the continuum of care interacts with stakeholders and the community to achieve that success, and to clarify what role the COC serves in our community, and of course identify the top priorities for the continuum of care over the next year or so. You know, gone are the times when you would develop 5-year plans. We're looking at the more near future than many plans have probably in the past. And this process engages a task force that is comprised of COC leaders and board members. Of course, today I'm here with you, the COC board, which we try to keep engaged throughout this process. The COC Leadership Committee is, of course, important to this process. We see them as sort of the systems thinkers, and we try to work closely with the COC provider staff. So here's our progress to date. I don't need to tell you that COVID-19 has had an impact on many things, and certainly this process as well. But despite that, I think we've been able to move along pretty well. We had our project kickoff about a year ago. I can't believe it's been that long, but it has. And we launched a survey of continuum of care leaders, many of which, hopefully most of which you participated in, to help us think about what the COC should be. Are there barriers to the success of the continuum of care? And to develop a solid vision for the work of the continuum of care. Since then, well, then COVID-19 hit. And we weren't able to meet for a while because, for obvious reasons, this group and providers and the city of Milwaukee were focused on meeting the needs of homeless people, of course. But we were able to sort of re-engage about the end of summer. And since then, we've been working on some of the barriers to success that were identified in that survey. So think of it in terms of a set of internal barriers and external barriers. Internal being, how are we functioning? What's the structure of the COC? What's the communication mechanism? What could be better? And in addition to that, external barriers to homelessness, the types of services that are offered. So we've been looking at internal barriers for probably about the past 3 months. And some of your board members, as well as other leaders, city staff, have been involved in those conversations. But one of the most important things we've done is identify a vision, sort of an impact statement that was approved by the COC leadership. And we've been waiting for the next step with the COC board to actually look at that statement and finalize it. So what's this strange diagram? We tried to capture what came out of the survey, and through our work with the COC leadership, we identified, first of all, the vision. You'll see the vision at the top, which we'll come back to in a moment. And we're working toward identifying outcomes. You know, if we have a vision, what is it? What does success look like for the COC? And you'll see a number of things, which shouldn't be a surprise to you. Accessible, affordable, and diverse options for housing on through improved housing policies and practices. Some of the outcomes we have more direct control over than others, but this is what we'd like to see in terms of homelessness. And of course, the impact being the functional end of homelessness in Milwaukee County. You'll see to the left, these are the barriers I spoke of a few moments ago. Some of the things that keep us from being successful, the COC from being successful. You'll see lack of affordable, adequate housing options, Certainly housing insecurity, housing policies, practices, lack of funding for new initiatives, and CoC structural issues. And those are the issues we've been working on, I would say since about September, very, very diligently, I would say. And then from that, we identify the CoC's major strategies, and you'll see the beginnings of strategies right here. And they're pretty simple, but they're all three very important. Strengthening the CoC, making sure we address those structural issues, that we have clearly defined roles, clearly defined board structure, and that it's all operating very well. Another strategy that's emerging is what we advocate for, and we haven't filled in that blank yet, but we will. And then third, of course, securing appropriate public and private funding. One theme that we've discussed throughout this process is we certainly benefit from a great deal of public funding in many ways. You know, I think the CoC in the city does a great job of putting funding together to meet a plethora of needs of homeless individuals. But still, the CoC believes that there are things that are falling through the cracks, and is there a way that we can make the case for additional funding, possibly private funding? So we'll be working on that in the year to come. So this is sort of an outline, I would say, of where we are to date with, let's go back up to the vision being the most important thing for today. And I'll go ahead and read that because this is what we want the CoC to take, the CoC board to take action on today. This vision has made its way through the task force that's working on the planning process, as well as the provider group, the CoC leadership group. So the CoC is a cohesive force of influence consisting of homeless service providers, advocates, and government that can avail substantial resources and lead the community in the collective, compassionate pursuit of ending and preventing homelessness. So that's the vision. And I would invite any of the folks who have been involved in this process to feel free to speak to the vision. But this is what we want the board to discuss and take action on today.
Are you asking for comments right now? Are we discussing this right now? I do have a question about the vision, and I don't exactly see myself, like, how is the board? I'm not a homeless service provider. I am an advocate, but not, I mean, unless that role is specific to the role of that, you know, the advocacy role, and I'm not government. So I guess I don't see myself named in the vision, or the board actually, in a way. So I don't know.
You don't see the board in the vision?
So that's that top sentence, right? Cohesive force consisting of homeless service providers, advocates, and government.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't see unless the board is, we're being called advocates, but which, okay then, but because like advocates, you know, there is like a specific role, like people have a job called advocate. So then if that's what that word means, then I'm not that. So anyways, I just don't see us named necessarily in that first sentence.
I thought we were all advocates.
Okay, so yeah, I mean,
by definition.
That's fine if that's where we are. I just was, like, for example, I do a lot of work with Sojourner Family Peace Center, and they have a job where people are, their job is called advocate.
Of course.
And I think there are people in the homeless working with homelessness as well who have that job title. So that's where I was glitching, if that's them or that's all of us, general or specific.
Yeah, I can see the confusion, but I think for this definition, it's going to be very broad.
Yes, I would agree. That is the case, John. and Kristen, in developing this, we saw service providers as, any service providers to homeless, to people who are homeless or to people who could become homeless. We saw advocates, you're right, very general, as others who advocate for people who are homeless or homelessness prevention.
Service providers, advocates, and government. And then, well, government, so like if homeless service providers are people, advocates are people, government's not people. So anyways, maybe that.
I was a people when I woke up this morning.
No, I know, but it's just not a.
Yeah, I think that,
But
again.
if we're not, yeah, okay, then it's good that I'm out. But also, okay, I'm still on this advocate, but I'm gonna move on. I give up. I like it. It's good. But I think we do more than advocate. We like lead too, So advocate, I don't know if it, but anyways, I think it's fine.
I think Dan did a good job this morning of introducing himself as the advocate. I thought that was appropriate. But very good. Any other questions on this first part?
This is squat. What if we added, right, after advocates, activists?
Ooh.
Advocates, activists. I think that takes care of quite a number of us. But
Help you out?
say that again, John.
Does that help everybody out? I like that.
I did too.
The other thing that's also missing is those of us from higher education, like, Marquette and Medical College and UWM. We're involved in research and trying to use research to inform policy and practice. Is there a way to include that in the vision that, there is a commitment to evidence-based policy and practice? I don't know. Just a suggestion.
I think it would be appropriate to recognize the academic and research component of the COC.
And the policy component. And so like maybe in that second thing, because it's just like we can avail substantial resources and lead the community. So like we can take advantage of resources that are out there is a little passive in a way, but because like, we also could change policy, which we do, our legislature, like we work with, so maybe that second part where we can enact policies and avail resources, because I think what brings up a good point, and I think as advocates, that's something that we definitely do. Like we interact with county supervisors and alder people to say, hey, we need to change the policies that are happening in our community. So I think maybe that would go there, like what Guad is saying, like we, yeah.
Oh, this is Marcelia. Along those lines, and I was going to speak up in the barriers to ending homelessness. And I hear the policy piece, but I think it's important to state that a lot of what we would like to do at the county is preempted at the state, meaning the state legislature ties our hands and what we sometimes can and cannot do. So I think it may be appropriate to flush out some of those barriers that it's not necessarily policy and policymakers not wanting to change policy, but it could be that we are not able to because of state statute. So I don't know if that can be flushed out. Maybe preemption is listed as a barrier, or lack of coordination between governments. I don't know what that is, but I'd like that to be more clear, I think. So the legislators aren't just placed in a position of they don't want to do it. Sometimes we can't do it.
I think that's a good point. And actually even reflecting back to the HUD, like HUD dictates the rules and we all respond when we put together those proposals. But that might not be like how we've had these discussions. Okay, well now we're going to focus on child homelessness, which obviously is super important. But we don't always get to choose our own priorities we're responding to. So I think that not only, I think that's a really good point you just brought up too about the layers of government barriers and how we're working through all that. And that is a huge barrier, but then that also could be, we do with an eye working towards changing those policies and not just reacting to them. And providing evidence, which Nancy is our data guru, evidence collector. So we are seeking to gather and disseminate evidence to facilitate all of our work. So I think, like Watt had said, maybe back up in our vision about those things too.
All good points. And some of which the CoC folks have been working on, the people who are working on the details. For example, the folks who are working on the structural issues right now are talking about the HUD rules and the flexibility. To what extent does the CoC have any let me start over. To what extent can the CoC operate flexibly to meet needs that aren't HUD priorities?
We'll start to address that, I think, in the next slide.
So it sounds like with the addition of the concepts of activists up in the vision, working in evidence-based policy and practices, being cognizant of the ability to enact or change policies. I'm hearing that the vision makes sense to folks.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments?
Shelley, just a quick question. This is Raphael. Is this would that pretty much create a vision that may not be maybe too long, or do we look at, and I've seen our agencies, they would have like the two components of a kind of a mission statement and then a vision statement. The vision is really looking at like, how do we really, where do we want to go? And then, the mission statement is just like, this is our agency and this is what we do. So would it be too much, or do we need to even condense for adding those other 3 additional pieces? Do we, does that make it too big of a vision statement?
I think if it lends clarity to the vision, we're fine. We think that makes sense. So the way we use vision is, we call vision and intended impact, we use those terms interchangeably. And that's different from a mission that you try to keep succinct and short, the elevator speech or whatever, or fit it on a t-shirt. We want vision to be clear. And if it helps clarify the vision to add those concepts, that's just fine.
Great, thank you. Yes, all right, wonderful, thanks.
I was just gonna.
I like those concepts.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Mike.
I just had a question about the barriers. I don't know if you want to have like not too many bullet points or a certain number of bullet points or whatever, and maybe we'll get into more in next slides. But obviously, as a civil legal aid attorney, I think that there's a serious barrier that a lack of the right to counsel, and I think that actually I do consider that a barrier to ending homelessness. But maybe that's too sort of specific, or maybe that fits in later. But just wasn't sure if there was room to add more bullet points or not.
Thank you.
I support that. This is Squat.
Very good. Anything else? John, do you think the vision, just the vision statement itself, is something that we can get folks to approve of with the additions that we talked about?
I think those additions are very good. why don't we move on, keep moving on, and we can take it up at the, when we get, we'll do each slide and then we'll vote on the end.
Sounds good, John, thanks. So here are some of the internal structural barriers that we've been discussing. There it is, the role of HUD, its requirements, benefits, and limitations. And we feel like the more we understand the limitations, the more we can figure out how to operate flexibly and meet needs that don't fall within the HUD guidelines. Looking at the structure, how decisions are made, making sure that the roles of all involved are clear. Communication, ensuring that we're transparent, that our responsibilities are understood and communicated by all. The issue of revenue generation, how can we do that? We rely on and appreciate government funding to do much of what we do, but in addition to that, we'd like to meet or address some unmet needs. How can we generate revenue to do that? And if we are able to generate additional revenue, what is the process for determining how those funds are used? So those are some of the internal and structural barriers we're working on that you'll hear later once we're ready to send our recommendations to you.
Can I have a question on that first slide? That
Sure.
you just go back. Okay, so there's the city of Milwaukee. That's called out not so much because they're the city, but because of their role in the COC. As like
they're the lead agency. Absolutely.
I think it would help to make. I think that instead of including the lead agency or including the grantor or whatever their role is called. Because just having it like that, then it looks like, oh, well, why are they called out? Why don't we have the city of West Dallas called out? So anyways, plus, so then it would be more apparent, like why that's there.
Mm-hmm.
You want to say municipalities?
Or is that there because it's specifically about, like, I can understand the role of the city of Milwaukee has a unique role. They like submit the grant, they administer it, but then I would just call them that, including the lead agency or including the grant submitter, or whatever their title.
Sure, that's a good point.
Is, rather than the name of them.
Sure, that makes sense.
Because then it's more like, then when you read it, you're like, yeah, okay, I understand that. Like how do the city is doing all this work. So how is that, if we're trying to understand COC structure, then it totally makes sense. Like, but anyways. So
you can even add the local units of government, which would include municipalities in the county.
That's good.
Yeah, I think so too, because it is, even for being an insider, it would be useful for all of us to really understand, like, how is West Dallas, how is Milwaukee, how are these different local governments, how is Milwaukee County? Yeah, we're all involved.
Sure. Okay, great.
You know, I'm fine with including other municipalities because they do certainly play an important role in the COC and how it functions. What I hope, though, is that we don't also lose the distinct and specific role of the city of Milwaukee as the lead agency. That has a very specific and unique set of responsibilities and challenges. And structurally, that's one of the things that we are getting our arms around.
Yeah, totally agree, Tim.
Ready to move on?
Very good. Thank you, Tim. Good idea.
Service delivery barriers that emerged in the survey that we'll be working on starting in January are listed here. I'll just give you a second to look at those.
And then are we going to add the couple things that we already were discussing on that first slide?
You bet, Kristen, yes. And I'm sure in the course of conversation, other similar or related barriers to these will come up. So here are our next steps. I'm working with Raphael to revise the timeline. If COVID-19 had not hit, we would probably be just about finished right now, but it did. So we're moving some of our work into next year. And again, I'm working on with Raphael and the folks at the city to adjust that timeline. We'll complete our work on the barriers probably during the first quarter of 2021. We are looking at data and market data. So we'll be in touch with those who are responsible for that kind of information. We're kind of working through Claire at the city to make sure that we have what we need so that our task force, the task force that's guiding this study, can use that information in its work. And then from that, of course, we'll determine the strategic directions for the probably next year or two, similar to most planning processes. Any questions? John, should we go back to that vision?
If you like.
Well, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if we're going to vote on the vision statement, I would think we should have it. We need to have it written, we need to know what we're voting on. So if we're going to amend it in any way, let's do that amending now if you want us to act on it.
Yes, I concur.
I know this is going to be small, but I can certainly change it while we are talking.
And we've already had several changes if you want to incorporate those now. While we're talking about this.
I'm working on it. And folks, feel free to help me out here.
After activists, maybe do you want to put in researchers or academics? I'm not exactly sure the term of art we want to use there.
And you need another S in activist. Oh, you got it.
I don't think we have to call out researcher and academic because I think we fit in those other areas. I mean, plus, yeah, so.
When we say government, we're kind of covering academia.
Yeah.
Do we have, not that we need to list everybody, but do we have the medical profession?
I think we could, we can fit in activists, advocates, providers.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Very good.
I'm adding in resources and research, or I could say including research, whichever makes the most sense.
Does avail mean we just take advantage of what's already there, or does avail also mean that we create resources and research?
Ooh. I think avail sort of means what's there.
That's what I was thinking too, because we will do that, of course, but we're also creating it. And if one of our things is going to be revenue generation, then we are definitely looking to create resources too, so.
Good.
Shelley, perhaps you could add after compassionate, evidence-based pursuit.
Oh, very good.
Oh, very good. Thanks, Tim.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? I think everything else that was mentioned can fit into sort of what we do rather than, you know, what we're working toward. Shall I bring it back up?
Yeah, one minor nit, you might want to make government plural.
Thank you, John. I like it. Anything else? Oops.
So what else do we need to have changed?
I think, you know, as several others, members of the board noted, under barriers to ending homelessness, which is not what we're looking at in terms of vision, but just a reminder to add the lack of legal representation, and then also the multiple layers of government not always being in sync relative to strategies and priorities. Whether that be federal, state.
And where did you want that place at, Tim?
Just under barriers, I think, would be an appropriate place to identify those additional areas that board members have called out.
The legal representation, I would word it as a lack of a right to counsel, because you don't have a right to an attorney in eviction case when you're facing homelessness the way you do in some other cases. You can, and it can be done in Milwaukee, but it's not done in Milwaukee. So.
A nice nuance, Molly.
Okay.
Local units of government.
Got it.
I'm able to mute folks, so that's the little power I have here on my laptop. As they're slurping on their whatever that is, Steve.
Mighty tasty drink.
Yes.
Big gulp.
Okay. Anything else? Is this it?
If there are no additional changes, corrections, comments, I think we're ready to proceed to approve. Is there a motion to approve? A second?
One second. This is Andy.
Thank you, Andy. Any additional comments? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you very much, Shelley. That was very good.
My pleasure. And we'll be back to share our progress and more information with you as we proceed.
Very good.
Thanks, Shelley.
Thanks, Raphael. Thanks
Moving
to all
on
of
to
you.
warming
I
shelter.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you again, Shelley. Emily, you're going to talk about warming shelters and hotel placement?
I can. So just a brief update so that everyone knows kind of how things are different this year. Because of COVID, we aren't doing the large congregate warming rooms where everyone, you know, piled into like St. Ben's or repairs of the breach. So instead we are placing folks in, most of the sites are, in addition to shelters, are hotels, although we're looking at an additional site that where people can have like a separate room and space to be that isn't a hotel. The city's working on that if we need additional space. So we're calling them, what are we, it's like isolated spots or folks where, places where folks can isolate for overflow from shelter. And so the process is also a little bit different this year, which I think might be an improvement overall. So we'll kind of see how this goes. But if someone is in need of emergency housing, they call 211, and we try to do prevention or diversion resources first, like with community advocates is probably our largest other referral, to try to help prevent homelessness. But if we can't do that, then they come and get an assessment at our navigation center. We've expanded the hours of those till 8 p.m. During the week. It used to close at 4. And so then we do an assessment and try to figure out what, try to problem solve what other resources they might be able to use. And then if there aren't any, we're able to place from there. And so we're, in terms of knowing more about the people that are going in and trying to do a better job planning for housing stability afterwards, I think that's an improvement. I realized I didn't have my video on, I'm sorry guys. Last year, well, in all the years past, going to warming rooms, we had large groups of people that would just kind of peter out around March, and we didn't really have a good sense of where they were going and what they still needed. So I think the benefit to this is that we have more planning purposes. Some of the challenges are that there's, we need to make sure that we are continually figuring out how to have enough space and how we figure out how we get people into a housed situation as quickly as possible. So far we have placed everybody that has been verified and has asked for placement. So everyone that we're seeing on the streets and are asking for placement. I should also mention that during the night, we are doing, it's like the police call on third shift or street outreach workers, that placement happens through 211. So there's placement around the clock, which is different from years past as well, where there used to be a kind of a curfew at the warming rooms. So I don't know if there are other questions. That's just a high level overview of the process. We have a whole like outlined process that's written down with hotel guidelines and kind of a whole new process that we're working through to make this as organized as possible.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. I think we can share that document with you all if after this meeting, just kind of see all the work that went into kind of creating that very unique process based on the delicacy of making sure folks are safe indoors. Just to give you an update too on the hotels, we do have the 3 hotels, same hotels we've had since, actually we have a new one. We still have the Ambassador Hotel, actually the Ambassador Inn, which has the capacity at 40, which is basically pretty much full at this point and has been since April. When we opened up the space. We also have the Hampton Inn over on Silver Spring and Lovers Lane, which I think, Emily, we're about 45 there.
Yep. Yes.
Quite a few families at that location, which is a location we've been kind of dedicating specifically for families. We do have families and singles there, but we want to keep the families separated from the single hotels as possible. And the Super 8, which is a new hotel we opened on November 1st. This is a great partnership with them. We do have the capacity, if we have the staff support, to go up to about 85 rooms there. We currently are at about 45 or 50.
A little over, I think it's 47.
Yeah, so we're at 47. And just so you know, the logistics and the planning and the staffing of these locations have been extremely challenging. Just knowing that this is the first time we've basically opened up a a hotel as a non-congregate isolation site. But let me tell you that with these partners on this call and our COC leadership and all of their staff, they've worked extremely hard to make this work. And knock on wood, we haven't had many COVID outbreaks within either our shelters and or our hotels. We've had a couple, but luckily here in Milwaukee, and I've had conversations with other COCs around the state, but we are very fortunate to have Nick Tomorrow at the Health Department and his staff working with us. If there's an issue, they are able to go and help with testing right on the spot. And also, we do have the testing site at Clare Hall available to all of our providers or all of our partners within our COC, and they have access to that. And they call a number and they set up an appointment and they can get tested. So that's been extremely helpful for us. So yes, those are the 3 hotels, and we still have Clare Hall. Jim's not on the call, but Clare Hall is being operated by the City of Milwaukee Health Department. From what I understand, there's about 20 folks, and that specific site has been really dedicated to folks who are either COVID positive or who are symptomatic. But there's in the works, from what I understand, there's going to be an extension of the lease agreement with the Archdiocese. So we may go in and we may have this space more long-term, maybe post-COVID. So we'll give you guys an update maybe at the next meeting on that specific partnership with the Archdiocese. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with the hotels, and Emily and her team at Impact have been heavily involved in that process of making sure we get the folks that need to get indoors. Any questions? I guess we can open up to questions, John.
If I could just add, I think, one critical piece that we are in the process as a COC of implementing is the community case managers. There are 4 COC partner agencies who are either have hired or are still in the process of hiring staff designated specifically to attending to the needs of individuals who in years past would have been in overflow, and in our current framework are either placed in hotels or at Clare Hall or temporarily as shelter spaces become available. And I think that's a really critical piece to figuring out how to develop a housing plan and get people moving more quickly from these temporary housing arrangements into back into the community and into more permanent supportive housing resources. So that, I think, is a really important element of why we think this approach to non-congregate sheltering care is hopefully going to be effective.
Thank you, Tim. I'm sorry I left that off. It is crucial. I keep saying every day, we the fastest you can hire, because yeah, that individualized housing plan is the key.
Well, our community case manager starts today, so that's about as fast as we could move.
Good for you, Tim. Is there anything else on the shelter? If not, Emily, thank you. And Emily, we can move into number 5, the COC outreach verification policy or process.
Yeah, so this is a, and here I can share this.
Raphael, can you?
I was able to do it, so.
Hey.
So we updated our outreach, well, we created a policy, a potential policy around and procedure around the outreach verification process to make sure that we are in alignment with what the Hearth Act says. And just making sure that when a person, street outreach team or a third party is verifying someone's homelessness, that it's compliant with what HUD says, so that there's no risk of them being kicked out of housing down the road. And this policy had feedback from the street outreach teams, our street outreach collaborative, and then it's also gone through coordinated entry leadership and the CoC leadership bodies. So we define first what the what literal homelessness is, what a place not meant for human habitation is according to the Hearth Act, a third party person, street outreach, and then HMIS. And so, let me go back up, sorry. So first part, the Hearth Act says that the street outreach worker, see, I already, every time I read this, street outreach worker will observe evidence of the person living in a place not meant for human habitation. So that could happen if it's like a tent or an abandoned place where someone is sleeping. If you can observe that there's evidence that the person is living there, that can happen kind of any time, and someone can say that this is verification of the person sleeping in a place not meant for human habitation. But if there isn't evidence of the person living in that space, if they're saying that they sleep at a bus stop or they sleep in their car, but they don't have like stuff in their car, then that can happen while the person is sleeping. If the person is sleeping so generally that's during the hours of 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. unless they're up during those hours, in which case we could verify them sleeping during the day. So if they say that they're up awake at night, but they're because they're working or because they don't feel safe sleeping at night, you could see that they're sleeping in those spots during the day. We already have this, but we just put it into writing that HUD funded street outreach teams have at least one shift per week during the hours of 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. to complete those verifications. And then we also, verifications can come through 211. We have a new process through HMIS where there's a referral put in through the CoC Outreach Collaborative so that it goes to all the street outreach teams, and they can print a report every morning that says here are the people that have requested verification and here's where they say that they're going to be. So they can run that before each shift, and then they document back into the database what their attempts have been and if it was successful or isn't. So that we're able to kind of track people's requests and then what happens to them. It doesn't have to be a HUD funded street outreach team that documents this. So it could be a third party person, a business, or someone is sleeping outside. Will, I need you to be quiet. Or someone is outside of a school, wherever, or church. They can write a letter specifying these are the times that I've seen them and this, this is the location, and they can send it into our team so that we can upload that into HMIS. Go ahead.
That includes emergency services too, right?
Yes, yep, police or fire, yes, yep. And then for people sleeping in emergency shelters or safe havens, that's in HMIS, but we can get a letter for housing purposes upon request. And then there are transitional living centers, or kind of these, I'll call them like mom and pop shops that are around, like Casa Maria comes to mind, where they're not HUD funded, but they are providing services and they're not paying more than 30% of their income toward rent, and it's short term for housing. So they can also write a letter saying that this person is homeless. And so we just say that we'll, these are the types of verifications that are accepted for HUD funded housing requiring a person to be category 1 prior to entry. And so the purpose of this is just to delineate that so that we know exactly what is accepted and what isn't for category 1 verification. And I don't know if there are questions, but we are, I believe, looking for potential approval of this policy.
Is there anybody that has any comments or questions about changing anything or Seeing none. Is there a motion to approve the outreach verification process?
This is Amy. I motion to approve.
Thank you, Amy. Is there a second?
Mildred Colby, second.
Thank you, Mildred. Any additional comments, questions, or changes? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, Amy. Moving on to the COVID responses. Raphael, Steve?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'll start, John. So just as you all aware, I think we talked about this back in, I think at our last meeting, but we've been allocated over and beyond our normal federal allocations, COVID response dollars, and they've come in different forms. One of them that's specific to the work that we do is the Emergency Solution Grant dollars, and the city of Milwaukee received 2 rounds of that funding from that funding source from the federal, from HUD. So round 1 was, I believe, back in April, of about $4.7 million, and that went specifically to support projects within the COC, mainly rapid rehousing, prevention, outreach services, and shelter services. And that also helps support the program that Tim mentioned earlier with the community case managers. We did also get a round 2 of that, but same specific ESG CV funding of about $5.7 million. We had a good discussion last week with our COC leadership to talk about how do we best utilize these funds, knowing that we have folks who are in our hotels that we need to put a housing plan in place for them. So we can use some of these dollars for rapid rehousing, maybe do some prevention with these, with this specific funding. So what we'll do, the plan is for us to release an RFP probably in early January to start allocating and utilizing some of these funds. So that's round 1 and 2 from our end, from the city of Milwaukee. But the state of Wisconsin also received ESG funding. We receive ESG funding through the state on an annual basis, non-COVID related, roughly about $600,000 a year. This time around for ESG CV COVID related, for the round 1 of state dollars, they had a formula, and Milwaukee received about $900,000. Those funds were utilized to support shelter operations. We used some of that for hazard pay, some for prevention, and some rapid rehousing. The state is going to release round 2 of these funds very soon. Actually, they've divided it up into a system where they're going to do an RFP, an open statewide RFP of about $7 million of the close to $20 million they received in round 2 for special projects. So any group that's providing homelessness services throughout the state of Wisconsin can apply for these funds, and the RFP for those specific projects will be, from what I understand, being released next week for decisions to be made in January. So we'll also get an allocation from that round 2 through their formula allocation of about $1.4 million. So remember, we got $900,000 the first round, so we'll get about $1.4 million the second round. So we'll continue to see what the needs are come early January. I think the fear is that we're going to have, not knowing what the eviction landscape is going to be come January and February. So we'll have opportunities to apply for maybe some eviction prevention, but also being very diligent around making sure we get folks housed as quickly as possible through a rapid rehousing program. So those are the two ESG funding sources that we've been able to work with for the last, I think, 10 months. And those funding sources will be going out, the process of getting folks on their contract and budgets, but we're almost there. I'm not sure if anybody else, you have any questions on the ESG part of it? Or anyone else want to comment on ESG funding? If not, I'll move on to, and I did mention this before at the last meeting, but this really unique partnership with the Greater Milwaukee Foundation and its Funders Collaborative and their response to COVID. Myself and Nicole Agrisano from United Way are co-chairing a housing and shelter task force for this initiative. And we have members involved in this group. We have about 10 to 15 members, all from different sectors of the community. We have funders like Zilber, United Way, Greater Milwaukee Foundation. We have some folks who are on this call that are part of this, that are COC members. David Nelson, our board member, and Jim Matthew and Eric Collins from the county. So this group has been meeting weekly since April and really having discussions on what are the needs based on how we're responding to COVID. And it's been really good to engage private philanthropic partners, and they're learning more about what we do as a system to better engage them in some of our work that we have been doing. And they've been supporting a lot of our system partners with grants through the COVID response initiative through the Greater Milwaukee Foundation. And this will continue on for quite some time. And I'll just give you a quick example on how private dollars have been supporting some of our initiatives. Back, I think it was in November, United Way purchased about 50 cell phones for our guests who are staying at our hotels. And this helps for us to connect with them, especially if we're working with them on housing plans. And these are things that we can't necessarily pay for with federal HUD dollars, but this gives us an opportunity to make these types of requests to our philanthropic partners on this committee to help us in the work that we're doing. So that's been extremely successful. I want to give, I'm not sure if Steve's still on the call, but we've also had some additional CARES money that we've been utilizing for rental assistance and eviction prevention.
That's Ralph. I'm still here. I apologize to everybody for hearing my delicious cold brew. That was coffee, by the way, not any other kind of brew. But no, this has been, we truly have been able to utilize every source of funds that have been available. The state has been very gracious to the city to find ways to get additional funds in. We're hopeful that we can extend the Treasury CARES Act funding into 2021 with the omnibus budget that is going to hopefully be passed this Friday by the Senate. That would afford us an opportunity to stretch our dollars even further. These dollars that we operate through the HUD funding has a 6-year, 4 to 6 year timeline for expenditure. The Treasury CARES Act dollars end December 31st. So we've been very diligent in spending these dollars and providing as much PPE we have. So the COC is very well taken care of as far as personal protective equipment that we'll be able to move forward with. And also there's going to be, in addition to your regular mask and such, we will have cleaning equipment for every shelter in our COC. When I say cleaning, I mean the fogger, disinfectant cleaning equipment, the backpack with the wands. So we're going to be, we purchased those, and so that's going to be another opportunity for us to make sure that we continue upkeep of our facilities, and we're looking for suggestions also on other things that are needed, past the thermometers, and maybe even individually what you might need, because your shelters are all unique. We are utilizing FEMA funds right now as a 25% match. So we're stretching our dollars as far as we can. But if you have individual needs by shelter, please contact Raphael and Claire. And we have about 2.5 weeks to be able to make sure we can get those expenditures and equipment in. So it's been a long haul, and I want to thank everybody who's truly been at the front line of all of this to figure this out. This is all new to us. These hotels, getting people off the street, thinning out a lot of our shelters, even working with the rescue mission to deal with their issues. They were hit first and hard with COVID, and they lost even some staff that it was, terrible losses. But in the end, we're all trying to straighten this out for whatever might come next. So just stay diligent and keep pushing like you have been, because this has really been a team effort in all of this system. And I really want to thank again Hope House, just on the side for the hotels, and 211 for putting together a makeshift, which is now almost a permanent system for us to address this issue of getting folks quickly housed. And the next step, of course, is, as been stated, is the housing plans. So thank you.
I just want to, John, can I just say one more thing? I think everyone knows that the Rescue Mission is one of our largest shelters in the city. They would typically have between 200 and 225 folks there during the winter months. We've been meeting with them fairly consistent to really work with them and see how they play a role in, especially during the winter months. They did have an outbreak early on, like in March or April. They've been fairly consistent about capacity. As of last week, there were about 114 in their men's shelter and about half full in their women's shelter. They have the capacity, and they're going to, based on being able to separate folks, to have about 125 capacity in their men's shelter, with the option to open up their gym for another 30 individuals. But again, I think that partnership has been that we've been constantly communicating with them. There's some issues as to folks not wanting to go to the rescue mission because of their rules, but it's been a slow process for us to engage them and work with them. And they've been, from what I understand, very active on the shelter and transitional task force, and coming to their meetings every month. But they play an important role in our system, and I think supporting them in the work that they're doing, and we're trying to do that as much as possible to engage them and to work with us. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that's a big agency, and we're still connecting with them and making sure they're working closely with us.
Anything else, Raphael, Stephen? And we'll go on to number 7, announcements. Anybody have any announcements?
Can I just mention something? Dan put something in the chat about vaccines. I think this has been a hot topic, obviously, since the first vaccines have been rolled out, I believe yesterday. So there's some guidelines, national guidelines, as to where our providers fall under. There's tier 1, and there's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, I think phase 4. I was trying to find the actual diagram, and I can't find it, but our homelessness providers fall into phase 2, like in the middle. So in phase 1, you have obviously the frontline workers, hospitals, and also the senior centers and staff. And seniors who live in those facilities. So our COC and our members would be in phase 2. There's some advocacy happening now in Wisconsin to get our providers, homelessness and shelter providers, into phase 1. And I'll be on a meeting tomorrow morning with the State of Wisconsin Emergency Management Office, and they've invited someone from the and I'm blanking the name of it, but it's basically the Emergency Preparedness Vaccine Committee or something like that. But these are all state folks who are mainly medical professionals who are finalizing the plan as far as who gets vaccinated first. So there's some room for us to do some advocacy around making sure we get into phase 1. Minnesota, I just learned they moved their shelter and homelessness providers into phase 1, which is really good news. So I'm hoping that we can do the same here in Wisconsin. So I will keep you all updated on that process. I think it's important for us to be vocal around this issue, and we're going to continue advocating for this specific move into phase 1. So just want to leave it at that. I can update folks via email just to kind of see where we're at. I'm not sure when final decisions are going to be made, but I'll keep you guys updated.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Hi, this is David Nelson, and good to be on this call with everybody and to hear about all the cool things that are happening in the spaces. I have a question. We're writing a paper for some of the work we're doing during the pandemic response to homelessness and to outreach. And one of the things I've noticed, and I've not heard much talk of it, is that what's the state of meal programs and places where transitory homeless can go during the day? I know at one time the library was closed, and that put a significant damper on where people can go to charge their phones and use the bathrooms. For example, our meal program on Saturday through Street Life Communities, we used to serve 100 to 150 people on a Saturday. Last Saturday, for example, during that horrific storm that we had, we only served 7. I do know that the people are not, people are going without. And I also know that groups like Street Angels were impacted. They shut down their operations due to COVID. Is there anybody on the call that knows the state of the meal programs and how they are faring during this time? Thank you.
I'm on the Industry Council for St. Ben's meal program, and they are still operating and serving a high number of folks through a to-go model of service. The Gathering, from my understanding, is also continuing to do the same.
I know
it's my understanding. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, just here at Pathfinders, we're not a meal program per se, but we, through our drop-in center, do provide lunch and dinner for our youth and young adults 5 days a week. And we have shifted from congregate meals to individually packaged meals. And we've had a great volunteer response throughout the community. So we've got our meal schedule full, I think, through the middle of January in terms of meals being delivered and ready for distribution. So, we've prioritized that though in terms of, an essential basic need that we want to make sure our youth and young adults continue to have access to.
And I believe that the Open Door Cafe downtown at the Cathedral of St. John the Evangelist is operating a brown bag individual serving kind of lunch program now as well.
I appreciate hearing about that, all of those. Claire, if there's any way to distribute a listing of who is still serving, I think that there would be multiple groups that would find that interesting, and ways that we can get people still provide support the needs of the individuals.
Can I just make a quick comment, John? Yeah, thank you, David, for bringing that up. I think it's food insecurity is a huge issue at this point. I turn on the news and that's all you see is folks driving, lining up, collecting food all over the country. Just to FYI to folks on the call, in partnership through this whole Greater Milwaukee Foundation's Funders Collaborative, there is a group, a food group focusing on that specifically, like we're focusing on housing and shelter. Gina, the executive director of the Zilber Foundation, is the chair of that committee, and she's been extremely involved with that, along with Hunger Task Force, Feeding America, and multiple partners that are in the field of food and serving food are very engaged in that process. And there's a lot of funding that's being that's supporting these initiatives, including, I believe we've done some funding through the city to help in some of their efforts. But yeah, it's definitely concerning and definitely something that we have to keep an eye on. It definitely relates to the work that we're all doing here. But yeah, it would be great to, I can ask Gina if there's something specific that they put out as far as food resources. I know that Hunger Task Force and Feeding America's website, they have links on their websites that outline the places where folks can go. But I'll look into see if there's any other additional resources.
Very good. Anything else? I would like to make one announcement. Several years ago, I helped create a First Ring Industrial Redevelopment Enterprise, a new market tax credit group. And we've been extremely successful. We got $350 million in tax credits. So I'm going to be retiring from the city at the end of the year and going to work. I'll continue to be president of FIRE, but now I'll also be CEO on a part-time basis. So that should be kind of fun. So I'm looking forward to that. The mayor has asked me to continue to represent the city of West Dallas on the COC, and I told him I'd be delighted to, so I'll still be around.
Congratulations. Well deserved.
Thank you, Dan.
Yes, congratulations on that. Very exciting.
Yeah, it is.
Congratulations, John.
You'll finally be able to play some golf.
Yeah, that was pretty good, Dan, that summer. We have to be at the same golf course in two different groups, and Dan calls my cell phone. He's right behind me just to see if I'd answer his call. Thank God I did. But anyway, anybody have any additional announcements?
Yeah, John, we'll take $350 million as well. Thank you.
If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say by saying aye.
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 Same sign, motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, and happy holidays.
Be well,
Happy
everybody.
holidays to everyone. Thanks.
for all you
Take
do.
care.
Bye-bye.